For all those reasons, and coupled with a 365-day-year season, it's open all year long. It's arguably one of the best trout fisheries on the planet for the size, numbers, and the amount of days available. It's fabulous.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Today, our destination is sunny, warm Redding, California, and the Lower Sacramento River. Our guest is expert guide and fly fisherman Greg Kennedy with The Fly Shop, one of the nation's largest fly shops and outfitters. In addition to Northern California, Greg has guided all over the world, including Chilean Patagonia, Alaska, and 11 seasons in Kamchatka. And he's here to tell us why the Lower Sac, as it's called, is a top destination for fly fishermen who love tying into large rainbows and lots of them. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you bet. So tell me, how good is the fishing in Kamchatka?
It lives up to the stories that everybody hears. The fishing has the potential to be legendary. It is arguably the best trout fishing on the planet. Those fish are more like a saltwater predator than they are the mayfly sipping trout that we've come to know and love here in the United States.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I heard they're 30-inch fish, right?
Yeah. That's the river that I've been on for the last 7 years has been, our goal is to get our guests into a 30 to 35-inch rainbow, and it happens every week.
That's lights out. How about that? That sounds like a blast. So you were telling me before the show that you've been fishing a couple of different places this week, some private water, some other creeks. How's the fishing been?
Oh, man, the fishing's been great. We've had a real mild spring and early summer around here. Typically, this time of the year, it starts to get pretty warm, but we've had a little bit of rain and a little bit of variability, and hatches have been great. The trout have been happy, and given some of the current circumstances where we haven't been working as much, it feels really good to be back out on the water with some really great people.
Yeah, how fantastic is that? All right, so, many anglers around the country might not think of, Redding, California as a hotbed for fly fishing. Unless you're from California, you probably knew all about that, but maybe for people in other parts of the country, they might not know that Redding is such a great spot to gather the fish. Northern California has some incredible world-class fishing opportunities. Can you describe, just broadly speaking, what the fishing opportunities are in this area?
Absolutely, yeah. Most people I tell I'm from California, they picture sunny beaches and big cities and essentially what Southern California has to offer. And they don't realize the variety that we do have here. We have the highest and the lowest points in the continental United States, or the lower 48. And we have some incredible opportunities and variety within that. So in Northern California, we have a year-round fishery here. As a guide, I get to guide potentially 365 days a year if I really choose to, from trout and steelhead, salmon, striped bass, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, spotted bass. We have some tremendous fisheries, and as the seasons change, so do our options. And it's a great place to live and call home, especially as a guide who can work all year long.
Oh, that's great. What are some of the top, creeks and rivers in your area?
So what we have, our flagship river is the Lower Sacramento here in town. It's a large tailwater that comes out of Shasta Dam, and ultimately it's the culmination of some of our top trout fisheries, which are just kind of starting to fire up as of the end of April. Places like the Upper Sacramento River, the famed McCloud River, which has arguably the most widespread trout on the planet, the McCloud River Rainbow. Then you have places like the Pitt River, our spring creeks like Hat Creek, and the world famous Fall River, which is, I believe, one of the largest spring creeks in the world.
Okay.
And then and a ton of others to fill in there as well, but those are kind of our main options.
Okay.
And then throughout our fall and winter months, we have our steelhead over to the west, anywhere from the Pacific Ocean over here into the valley of the Sacramento River near Redding. We have steelhead throughout those months.
That's great. And so you were telling me that the fly shop is one of, if not the largest fly shop in the U.S., and there's got to be a reason for such a big fly shop to be parked right there in Redding.
That's correct, man. I mean, the year-round fishery definitely holds the guide service up and running in a big way. We harbor about 15 to 20 guides throughout the season, some traveling to Alaska and places like Russia, like myself in the summertime. So the number of guides available changes, but we do a very large number of days throughout the year, whereas places like Montana and Idaho and the Rockies regions, a lot of times you have just the summer months or, the spring, summer, and fall months as options to guide. We have a year-round fishery that's every day offers something incredible and unique.
It's an angler and a guide's dream, right?
Yeah. And, most of the time people, again, associate California with large numbers of crowds, but my goal, my prime options are trying to get away from people. And I think the majority of the days that I spend on the water, I get to have the river to myself. And many days we don't see another angler. So California has a lot more options than most people think.
Right. If something gets crowded, you can just switch it to a different river. That might be a good reason. That's a great reason right there to call a guide like yourself.
Most definitely. I should probably be a little more careful about what I want to talk about because I'm not sure we need to get everybody out here.
Don't share all your best secrets on this one, but
right.
Maybe a few. All right. So I have to confess, when I called you, my plan was, let's talk about the Upper Sac, because I've fished that a number of times and had really good luck. But I always asked the guides, what would you talk about? And you instantly said the Lower Sac. And so tell us why you're so excited about this fishery.
Well, the Lower Sac, it's just a trout factory. It's a tailwater and has a very consistent water temperature. There's 4 distinct runs of king salmon in the river, or Chinook salmon. And the winter and spring run versions of those are threatened and endangered. And as a result, they're able to select and draw water from a very specific thermocline of elevation and temperature. They select 50 to 52 degree water all year long, whether it's 30 degrees around here or 120 degrees in the valley. The water temperature remains the same. And as a result, the bug life flourishes and our trout populations explode. And so it's too large of a river to really get a population estimate, an accurate population estimate of the trout, but it has to be in the tens of thousands that this river harbors.
Yeah.
And the amount of guide days and guides that we have out there on the regular, hooking many fish a day, it continues just to be a gem and pump out a lot of really big, robust fish. Fish.
Okay.
We interact with fish on the regular between 20 and 26 inches.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a nice rainbow. Now, do those big ones get real aerial, like, the 16 inches or so do?
Sometimes our fish are acrobatic and sometimes they're not. Most of the time they stay kind of deep, but every once in a while, they're like people. They have different personalities, and some are acrobats and some are lazy slugs.
Okay. Does it depend on the day, or do you just think it's fish to fish?
I think it's time of the year, and I don't have my thumb on what time of the year. I don't think anybody knows exactly when the fish are going to be jumping, but sometimes fish just surprise us, and every fish for the day goes crazy and goes nuts and jumps and does all sorts of stuff. But it's a big river, big, powerful, swirly, boily river at times, and a lot of times during those moments, they really just keep their head down and fight deep.
Yeah, okay. Oh, interesting. So it's, like you said, it's a tailwater, so it comes out of Shasta Lake, right? And it's 400 miles long, right?
Massive body of water, yeah. Starting at, there's a little buffer reservoir below Shasta Dam. It's called Keswick. It's kind of, basically they're able to generate hydroelectricity, but still maintain the same volume of water going down the river. That's what that little buffer reservoir is. So from Keswick Dam on down essentially to the San Francisco Bay is the length of the river. It traverses a lot of different terrain and changes as it goes downriver. And the majority of our trout fishing is within the top 50 miles of that river. As it gets down, it starts to warm up quite a bit. And you have more warm water species like our bass species. We have the striped bass that were introduced to the West Coast some time ago. They're starting to make their migration right now and getting ready to do their spawn here in the next month or two.
Okay. All right. That's great. So yeah, the upper sections, like, what is it, kind of fast and riffly up there? Because it goes right through Redding, doesn't it?
It does. It's literally our backyard. I could probably hit a golf ball 4 times from my house and make it into the river.
Oh, that's great.
It's right there. It flows right through, offices and certain businesses on the river. And Redding is definitely a river town, and there's restaurants that are on it. It's beautiful. It's bitchin'. And as you get further down, you get more into the orchards, and you get away from the towns and away from establishments. And it changes dramatically.
Yeah. What's it look like down there? Because is it actually kind of wilderness when you get down a little bit?
In certain places, yeah, there's actually a slot canyon that it goes through down near the town of Red Bluff. The water slows down quite a bit down there. It doesn't have as much of a steeper gradient. The steepest part of the river is in these upper sections, so more of the classic riffle run pool areas are up here, and some of the more robust trout populations are up in this upper reach. But as you go down further, there's some tremendous fishing, and like I said, you get away from town, and I think that's kind of more what fishing is to me, is getting away from the hubbub of normal life as much as possible. So I prefer a lot of times those lower rivers, the lower section of the river.
So if you're coming out on your own, you could fish right through Redding if you wanted to and do well, right?
Yeah. The most well-known section of river is right in town, literally downtown Redding. Kind of begins at the Sundial Bridge there at a place we call the Posse Grounds, and then we float down to either Bonneview Boat Ramp or down to Anderson River Park, either about a 6 or 12-mile float, depending.
Okay. Oh, that's great. And I'm just looking on a map. It's real kind of twists and turns and whatnots as you get south of town, doesn't it?
Very much so. Yeah. Just kind of meanders its way down the Central Valley.
Okay. And so like Redding to Anderson, down to Red Bluff, what's the area for people that they should focus on?
Yeah, most people focus on that Anderson River Park upriver, or the next boat ramp below Anderson River Park is Balls Ferry boat ramp. Balls Ferry Bridge has a boat ramp there, and there's a myriad of options within those floats too. There's other boat ramps where you can, stagger your progress. But that's for the most part the majority of the easy to read water. As you get downriver, like I said, it flattens out. It's a little more difficult to read, just difficult to understand why the fish are where they are. So it's that, person who's never come and fished the Lower Sac would have a hard time understanding where to fish in those lower areas. And sometimes that's why I prefer to be down there, because most people don't go there.
Yeah, kicks most people's butts. They can't figure it out, huh?
Yeah, it's an intimidating body of water. It's big. It averages anywhere from about 3,000 CFS, up to 15 to 20,000 CFS sometimes in the springtime. There are times where it gets much larger during our larger rain events and snow events and snow melt and that sort of stuff in the springtime. But we fish it up safely up to about 20, 25,000. And we can do it over that as well, but I would definitely not, I wouldn't advocate most people, unless they're really well versed in the river, to go out any higher than that. It can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, it sounds like it's ripping at that level.
Yep.
So how much do the flows affect the fishing? Like some tailwaters, the fish really like it when the water's coming up and getting a little strong. What about the Sac?
Yeah, there's times where the river endures a change and the fish completely go off. Every guide on the river is scratching their head, looking at each other, texting each other, going, "What the heck's going on? How is it for you?" And
yeah,
I think the fish just kind of get either sometimes claustrophobic as the river drops, and but sometimes it equates to good things. Fortunately, the flows do change predictably certain times of the year, and we can kind of have our thumb on when those changes are going to happen. And, it is what it is. Fishing, it's called fishing for a reason. So we go out there and have fun time no matter what.
Yeah. So the flows, are they steady, like same flow for weeks on end, or is it like daily changes?
Oh, no. Yeah. Most of our changes are gradual. It'll stay for a long period of time, the same flow, and then increase. Basically what the increased flow is there for is to, we have California's largest agricultural areas south of us, the Central Valley. And so it's one of the largest rice producing areas in the region, nut producing. There's all sorts of different agriculture going on. And so to meet the needs of those farmers down there, the flows increase this time of the year, especially to water their fields, and then it'll drop. And so agriculture plays a large role in it, but the same with those endangered species I was talking about. Those fish are taken into account, and they dictate some of the flows as well.
Okay.
So it's a delicate balancing act for Department of Water and Power for the most part.
I see. So it's ag-based versus power gen.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hydroelectric in there as well. And, it definitely, it all plays a role.
Okay, I gotcha. So I would love to hear a little bit about your story. So I know you're from Southern California, but here you are in Redding, guiding trips on the Lower Sac and all over the world. How did you end up there?
So I cut my teeth in the fishing industry down in Southern California. I was born and raised down in San Diego County. My whole family, my uncle had a tackle shop out on Newport Pier when I was a youngster, and so grew up in the inshore sport fishing world, just really as knee-high to a grasshopper, and then moved to Mammoth Lakes where my dad started a fly shop called the Trout Fitter, which still is there. And about second grade is when I started, doing my homework on the countertops there. My brother and I both, he's 6 years older than I am. We both grew up in the fly shop there, and my brother started guiding, before I did. He'd go pick me up from school and take me down to Hot Creek and go spend the evening fishing dry flies. And the days that we didn't go fishing, I'd be doing homework on the countertops and helping customers intermittently in between my math homework and English writing or reading.
That's great.
And started guiding prior to my ability to legally drive a car. At the age of 15, I started taking guests. We had a lot of Southern California guests. Mammoth Lakes is the town, and it's about a 5-hour drive from Los Angeles. And it's really kind of their backyard playground. 5 hours of a drive. They're up in the hills, high elevation, alpine lakes and streams and snow melt that creates places like Hot Creek, the Upper Owens River, the East Walker, the San Joaquin.
Yeah.
Famed waters in the West United States. And then eventually, the pull for bigger water and bigger fish kind of came in. We used to spend a lot of time traveling to Northern California with our dad. And eventually my brother came to me and said, "Hey, I'm moving to Redding to go work with the fly shop. Would you like to go?" I said, "Absolutely." And in a few days later, I packed up my U-Haul van with all my belongings and set sail kind of out into the great unknown. I really didn't have an idea as to what Redding was, even though I had been through the town and spent most of the time out of Redding on the rivers and streams around the area. And so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but the date was August 19th. And that very day, it was the hottest place in the world. I remember Mount Lassen coming over from Reno here, and I pulled over. Local news came on, the local country station, and it said, "Redding, California, hottest place in the world today." I said, "Oh, crap, I've made a huge mistake." It was 119.
Oh, my gosh.
And I thought I'd made a huge mistake, but then, August faded into September and September into October. Fall colors came, the steelhead showed up, and then I realized why I was here and why my brother had brought me here. And
nice.
I fell in love with the place, man. And 20 years later, here we are.
How'd you end up going to Russia then?
So I fell in with the fly shop, and fly shop was responsible for developing a lot of the travel program there. They were some of the first people to go to the place and developed relationships with these outfitters and started lodges essentially. And now they're still the leading booking agent for the region. And one day I got a job offer from an operation in Alaska where my brother had been working for the past few years. And I went to the owner of the shop. I said, "Hey, I'd really like to go guide in Alaska. I got this job offer. What do you think? I'd need to take off the summer." He's like, "Well, isn't that where your brother works?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well," he said, "I'd hate to have to make the phone call one day to your mother that both her sons went down in the same plane accident." I'm like, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Is this where he tells me that I can't go?"
That's what he said.
And he said, "We've got another option for you. What do you think about Kamchatka, Russia?" And I had heard about the place and read about it and watched the videos and thought it was a place that at a $10,000 price tag per week, I'd never get the chance to go.
Yeah.
And
right.
Here it was that fell into my lap. And anyway, 11 years later now, I've been there every year since.
That's great. That's really cool. And now you're pretty easy to spot, right? Because you told me you're 6'9", huh?
Yeah, I might be one of the taller guys in the world right now, but 6'9". Everybody always wants to know if I was a basketball player and that sort of stuff, but I say nope. The world was meant to have me as a fly fisherman, and
there you go.
There's definitely a lot of huge advantages. People trying to wait, my guests trying to follow me down a river, they definitely have their work cut out for them.
They can see you in that boat, so that's great.
Yep.
Well, that's a great story. Well, I also wanted to ask you about how the coronavirus has been affecting your business. We're in kind of mid-June here, and the world's coming out of these shelter-in-place orders. And how's California doing, and how are you guys doing at the fly shop?
We've been very, very careful with our stance on this. We've been ultimately, as a guide, my calendar, the middle of March was kind of the tapering off time of our steelhead season here, winter steelhead. And it went from a full calendar for me. March and April are great times of the year, transitioning into our warmer months. The sun starts coming out. We have 80-degree days. It's beautiful and sunny and nice, and you come out and worship the sun again. But it went from a full calendar to literally zero. The majority of our guests come from places like Southern California and the Bay Area. Bay Area has a lot of, with the industry there's a lot of money that comes out of there, and a lot of people that need to get out and go fishing. And to Redding is where they come. So I went from a full calendar to a completely open calendar in a matter of a week there, and kind of panicked a little bit.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But, we couldn't really hold people to our normal cancellation policies. We had to be lenient and understood and supported their decision to come back at a later date. We weren't trying to encourage people to step out of their shelter in place in wherever their home was and get out and about. There were no restaurants available. There were no hotels, places where they could stay. So rightly so, we let them stay home. And as of lately, the month of June has picked up immensely. People have started to travel. There's a lot of people that are not willing to do so, and to each their own. We're encouraging them to stay home, but those who have been careful and have been distant and have chosen to remain at their homes for a large duration of time or wanting to come up. People are gravitating to the outside world, and I don't blame them. When it happened and my calendar went to zero, I pretty much spent every day I could outside camping and fishing on my own. It was great. Nobody was outside.
Right.
It was all to myself, even more than usual.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, man, I'm sorry about the loss of April and May. Glad things are picking up again in June. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that we've got a GoFundMe site called Help Fishing Guides Survive the Coronavirus. And we're trying to raise money for the guides who are on the show. And we know it's difficult and uncertain time for a lot of folks right now. There are many people in need. But if you are in a position to support this GoFundMe site, we'd be extremely grateful to receive any help, even $5. I mean, honestly, just anything you can give would be greatly appreciated and would be encouraging as well.
Most definitely.
Well, let's shift gears. Yeah, let's shift gears back to fishing. So, all right, so I read that the Lower Sac is kind of like a big spring creek with these big smooth sections of water and super tricky currents. And this may be that section below Anderson that you were talking about. But so how important is presentation?
It's not critical to be perfect. Most of the time, having these large populations, the fish aren't getting extremely selective like you would expect to be synonymous with a spring creek. So,
okay,
calling it a spring creek, I understand it has certain similarities to that in that there's flow and there's meandering sections, but the fish are eager. The water is very deep. A lot of times our presentations are deep. Our style of nymphing is oftentimes with an arm's length from our indicator down to split shot.
Okay.
A lot of guys, fishing 2. Sometimes people fishing 3 flies. It's not out of the question. That's the legal limit. It's a little different than your typical fly fishing destination. Very unique. Okay. But then there's a lot of times, I fish a lot of the shoulder reaches, the riffles. You can get out and fish dry droppers. We do have moments where the fish come up and sip on the surface, but for the most part, the fish keep their head down. And one thing they do get is they get very quick mouthed. They're really quick to eat and spit. So a timely hook set is paramount.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So you're constantly nice way barking at your clients now. Hit.
Yep, that's exactly right. We have a saying, confidence is key, and hook sets are free.
Okay.
When in doubt, just set the hook. And the one great thing about it is on any given day, we interact with a very large number of fish. So if somebody messes up or misses a fish, it's not the end of the world. We just say, right, get the next one, let's work on that. And so for that reason, it's a great classroom. We get a lot of people that don't have the opportunity to fish on a regular basis. And they really have a good chance at getting better throughout the day because it's just a fun, friendly, open way to interact and learn line management and mending techniques and casting and feeding line and hook setting. Okay. So you end up doing a lot of teaching. Very much so. Yeah, we have some guests who come, once a year, every year. They just have their guys trip. They come up here. They come up there here with their wives. or their kids. And then we have people who come up 20, 30 days a year and fish here as well as other venues and really are serious about trying to catch fish and catch big fish. Some people just want to get outside, and we love those guys.
Yeah, there you go. What's a typical day? If you've got some decent anglers with you, what typical, not like off the charts day, but just a typical day?
It's not out of the cards to interact with 40 fish a day.
Oh, wow. Per person?
Per person steep, 20 fish per person is not crazy good. When it's really good, it is literally put it back in the water. Boom, you got another one. Oh, you missed him. He came up, put it back. Boom, you got another one.
Wow, fun.
As of lately, right now, we have some interesting caddis hatches going on. We have some really large hydrocyte caddis, which are like a size 12 and 14, which, if you know anything about a caddis pupa, it's essentially a swimming grub, right? It's a big, juicy, voluptuous, protein-ridden worm that swims around as a pupa. And these fish kind of go nuts over them. And so right now, we're not getting huge numbers all the time. There are days where we smack the piss out of them. But a lot of times, we're getting smaller numbers of much larger fish, days where we don't touch a fish under 18 inches and we put 25 fish in the net.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and for all those reasons, and coupled with a 365-day-year season, it's open all year long. It's arguably one of the best trout fisheries on the planet for the size, numbers, and the amount of days available. It's fabulous.
Right.
It can be cold and rainy, but, snow is almost never seen. It's just a pleasant fishery. The only time that it's really not fishable is if we get too much rain. There's times where it can get blown out and muddy and where the fish can't see the flies. But sometimes if it's just enough mud, that turns them on even more and they kind of throw caution to the wind.
a little stain's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just take us through the seasons. What are you doing in the spring, summer, fall? How does your setup and your approach change, flies, that kind of thing?
Most definitely. So we'll kind of come circle. We'll start off the winter months the mayfly hatches are kind of what's going on there, mayflies and midges. And then as we're coming into right now, we start transitioning into more of these caddis, like I was saying, that they've been feeding on mayflies and whatnot all winter long. They kind of go nuts over this protein-ridden diet. And so the caddis represent a huge food source for them. They go nuts. We have little yellow sallies cranking right now. Through the summer months, we'll have these hydrocyte caddis hatches as well as PMBs all summer long. And then as fall approaches, we continue with those same bugs. We get more mayflies as it starts to cool off. But one real cool natural phenomenon, since we're connected to the ocean, we have a run of Chinook salmon that come up here. And the region that we fish, especially up here in town, this is where they spawn. It's a salmon sanctuary. And so
oh, wow.
Deschutes Bridge is just down below Anderson River Park. From there upriver, it's closed to salmon fishing. And so they come up there, they make babies. And so much like those, listeners who've gone to Alaska, we have all these salmon that are spawning and they represent a food source. And so there's this egg hatch that happens. There's times where after the salmon die, we fish flesh flies. There's times where once the eggs hatch, we fish alevins, which are half egg, half fish, kind of like a pollywog, is not quite a frog or anything like that. So you have an enormous amount of protein that's available with that. So that's available. The salmon are there starting kind of October all the way until, the good egg hatches go until January, February, something around there.
Okay. But
we also have our great bug life throughout the fall months, caddis, mayflies. As it cools down, we go into our betas. And being a tailwater, we get some small bugs. And then in the winter months, it really cools off and we go into those midges and betas and that sort of stuff. But also being such a low elevation, the river itself is probably around 600 feet in elevation. We get some of the first salmon fly and stonefly hatches for the nation.
Oh.
The salmon fly hatch kind of starts here and then works its way all the way up. And as of right now is even happening still in the Rockies. But even in February, we start fishing large stonefly nymphs and the fish kind of can go bonkers over. One of our real popular patterns is the Pat's rubber legs, which is essentially just rubber legs, super floss rubber legs and chenille.
Yeah, right. So even though you're getting like a hatch of salmon flies, they still tend to focus subsurface?
Yeah, while we get the salmon fly hatch, the adult presence just isn't there. But when you put a cheeseburger drifting under the water in front of their face, it's pretty hard for them to deny that,
They can't resist. Yeah.
Yeah, when those bugs start migrating toward the banks, that's also a lot of times when our river starts to come up to meet the needs for the agriculture downriver. that dislodges a lot of the bug life in the shallows, or, they move into those areas.
Okay. So caddis you were talking about earlier were like 12s and 14s. Is that right?
Yeah, those are the big hydrocycles. And we have other brachyscentrus and all those other caddis as well, 14, 16, even, down to 18s and 20s, but they're not, it's difficult to fish those with more success than those big giant grubs.
Okay. Throw the grubs then. And what size are you typically throwing on the grubs?
Well, 12s, 14s, 16s, some of the more popular patterns to imitate those caddis, we use a lot of bird's nests. I mean, the bird's nest is an old cowbird back in the day. It's a very old pattern and kind of archaic for the most part, but it's just in the fast, heavy nature of the Sacramento River, the fish can't say no. There's another pattern that has become famous and was originally tied by the previous manager of the fly shop, Tim Fox. He's a fly tyer here in the Western United States and still is a guide out there. But he created a pattern called the Poopa, Poopah. Kind of a satire on folks who, instead of calling it a pupa, call it a poopa.
The Poopa? Okay.
Yeah. And it's tied with micro chenille on the back, a little flash in the body, a little hen neck for a throat, and then even some strands of feathers over for horns, and then an ostrich herl head.
Yeah. Okay. It'd be really great if we could get some pictures of some of these patterns, and we'll put them up on the Destination Angler Facebook page, if you're cool with that.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Good. And then you mentioned flesh flies, and did I get this right? Alevins?
Alevins, yeah.
Yeah, what are those?
So it's basically after the salmon eggs are deposited into the riverbed, they go into the gravel. The female creates a red, is what it's called, REDD. It's a depression that she fans with her tail and creates a little ramp up to a higher point. And then the eggs are laying in there and fertilized by the males. And then they sink into this gravel and are oxygenated by the water flowing through the gravel. And when they hatch, the little fish, eventually you see the eyes and the embryo develop, the eyes develop, and then all of a sudden, boom, it breaks open. There's a fish that has an egg sac attached to it, and that is what's called an alevin. Some people pronounce it a leavin. Maybe I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, some would say, but ALEVIN.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a world-famous fly tyer who still works for the fly shop in the travel department. His name is Mike Mercer. He's a contracted Umpqua feather merchant fly tyer and has been around for decades here. He grew up, I think, since he was 19 years old. He's been working with the fly shop, and some of his patterns, his Alevin patterns, are what we use. It's, what is it called? The Lower Sac fry, I think is what it's called. There's a bunch of different stuff. It's not a mainstay. It's not a staple for the guides out there, but they still do work. It's more of the point that option is there as a presence of the salmon.
Okay. All right. Any other patterns that you just really ought to have in your box?
Yeah, let's see. Mike Mercer, some of his patterns, including the Poxyback series, Poxyback Betas, Poxyback PMD. His Micro May is a great thin-bodied mayfly imitation for around here. And then, of course, the development of this more, jig style competition hook,
right,
tungsten beaded thing. Those thin profiled mayflies have been working very well out there. Flies. We have a fly called the Peaches and Cream, which is a PMD staple. The Sweet Pea, which is more of a dark biot bodied jigged fly. Anyway, all those sorts of things. Those are kind of staples. The rubber legs, gold stones.
That's rubber legs, man. We use those all over the country. That's a good one.
It's pretty tough to get away from that thing. It's amazing how simple it is. And yeah, it sure does. The translucent in the legs, I think, is the key.
Okay, interesting. And this river is big enough where, can you ever wade it? Are there places you can wade?
Most definitely. Right now, we're upwards of, I think it's 11,500 cubic feet per second. And so it's a little challenging to wade. There are access points along the way. Here in town, there's a few of them, and then as you get below town, there's some, and they're just spread out. The fly shop does have photocopies of accesses along the river that they've drawn up over the years.
Okay,
that would be a great place for somebody coming out just wanting to do some wade fishing. That's a tremendous resource. Go talk to those guys; they'll give you a photocopy and send you on your way, and really kind of help the learning curve.
Okay.
But a lot of guys this time of the year will go out in the evenings to those places and swing soft tackles, swinging those bird's nests and the poopas. And catch some very large trout during those low light conditions.
Okay. All right. So you can kind of get in if you're careful. Is it sort of time of year dependent as well, if you can wade?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just depends on which spot is accessible.
Okay.
As the water comes up, some of the places you can't walk out to, there's little islands and gravel bars when the water is low, and you can fish a very large portion of it.
Right. Okay. And there's something special about the type of rainbow that you're fishing for, right? It's a McCloud River rainbow, correct? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, there's a man, Livingston Stone, back in the earlier part of the century, who was fascinated with the development of fish and the science behind it all. And there was a fish hatchery named for him here, actually, back in the 40s when Shasta Dam was first created. And he tried to have seaward brown trout introduced and tried to grow more salmon, and eventually fell in love with the McCloud River rainbow. And then there was the railroad that ran from Reading through down to San Francisco, and then the ships out of San Francisco. And he took eggs of these fish and transported them to places like Argentina and Chile. All of South America have been populated by the McCloud River rainbow. New Zealand and Australia, any populations they have there are based off of the McCloud River rainbow. Hawaii has a population. Costa Rica has a population. South Africa. Really, it's not to say that it's, the original genetics of the rainbow trout for the world. It's just an example that was used and used to populate these places that didn't previously have trout populations.
Yeah, that's neat. Native rainbows. That's really cool. Well, good. And conservation wise, obviously the salmon are threatened, having some trouble. But how's the fishery in general? Things pretty good? Very much so. We've seen, as a result of Instagram and all this increased publicity, there has been an influx of guides and fishermen, I would say, in the area. But the fishery, even with this, more taxing presence of fishermen, the fishery remains robust, and the fish are big and happy and numerous, and it's incredible. It's incredible what it withstands and then continues to produce throughout. The river's in great shape, and that cold water conversion, again, is a huge reason why it is. Salmon populations, are a huge part of this river and the rivers of Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. And they're waning on the whole, and there's a lot of factors that I think play a role in that. But our trout populations are doing very well. It sounds like it. That's great. And obviously with the uptick in the number of guides and anglers, boy, this river is really coming into its own. I mean, it's great that it's getting popular, and it's not great that it's getting popular, probably. It's probably a double-edged sword. Well, and that's where it comes down to guides like myself, where we're the stewards of the river. Nobody's out there more than we are. So the example that we set is kind of, what everybody else picks up on. So we're very critical about how we handle fish and, our impact and cleaning up garbage. And I'm out there every day. If I see water bottle floating somewhere or something that some transient maybe has discarded into the river, I go out of my way and try to pick up as much of it as I can every day and set that example to all the others out there. And then it comes down to setting the example for the next generation as well. And so I urge people in any part of the country to do that. Take ownership of your river. Take ownership of your playground. Absolutely. Amen to that. Well, there you have it, folks. This is one of the top tailwaters in the country for producing consistent, rainbows in large sizes, 20 to 25 inches. My goodness, that would be really fun to go after those all day long. Greg, tell me about maybe there's some really famous restaurants people should be hitting when they're in town. There's some must-sees here. Reading's not famous for its cuisine by any means. It's not like going to Las Vegas or San Francisco or anything like that, but there's some kind of iconic places, one of which is Jack's Steakhouse. It's nestled in our downtown scene, which isn't much to write home about in comparison to a lot of urban areas. But it's been there for over 50 years. It's dark and dusty, fantastic bar. There's no reservations. You show up and just kind of have to belly up to the bar and wait. And they kind of hurt you in the meantime sometimes. Is that but right? Fantastic aged beef. They do kind of a gridiron style with seasoning, and it's a flat iron. It's awesome. That's a good one. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, you can have any salad dressing you want as long as it's blue cheese kind of thing. You know?
All right.
I think they do Italian and blue cheese, but the place is great. It's a must see. A lot of people come here just for it.
As long as they got a good beer and bourbon list, I'm happy.
Yeah. We actually have some. It took long enough, but we have some great breweries in the area too. Fall River Brewing Company is one of our more well-known, kind of award-winning places. They have tasting room here in Redding, and then they have their brewing facility. Actually, they do like food trucks and whatnot out there. It's a fun place, but they have some fantastic beers, and they have won some amazing awards that way. Redding's kind of coming into its own. There are some other great restaurants as well. We have some killer Mexican being in California. We have killer Thai. There's a couple sushi joints in town that rock, but Market Street Steakhouse here in town is kind of my go-to place, and it's about a block away from Jack's. So.
Very good. So lots of options there, folks, when you get out there. Yeah, Redding actually has some palm trees in it. I remember the first time I was out there, I was, Northern California looking at palm trees, and that was surprising. But it gets hot out there in the summertime, right? But thank goodness you're on, 56-degree water all day to cool you down.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Good question. Yeah. So first of all, the fly shop, I would say if anybody comes out here, utilize the fly shop. They've been here since the mid 70s. Wealth of information. They've got a whole crew that is well versed in all bodies of water around here. Use them, talk to them, ask them questions, call them if you wish. Go into the shop and they'll practically sell you a rock to stand on. They'll draw you a map. They'll tell you exactly where to go, what to use. The guides were here yesterday. You can find them at theflyshop.com. My brother and I are two guides. My brother, Chris Kennedy, and myself, Greg Kennedy. We work with the Fly Shop, and we operate a kind of a self-advertising campaign called Fish Kennedy Brothers. You can find us at fishkennedybrothers.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Fish Kennedy Brothers.
That's great.
We welcome all questions as well. Anybody coming out that is looking for any information, we converse with all of our guests on a regular basis and people around the country. We're coming out here. We invite you to give us a ring and ask us how we can help you.
That's nice of you. That's fantastic. All right. So we'll put some pictures of Greg's top picks, flies on our Facebook page. And we'll put all this stuff on our show notes as well on our website, the Destination Angler website. And as always, our music is by a Brothers Fountain, a band out of Colorado. You can email me with comments and suggestions at shaigh50, that's SHAIGH50 @gmail.com. Give us a like, share, or follow on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Listen, we really hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again next week.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.